Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. How is it
Hello,
going?
hello.
All right, sorry, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby Guerrero. Thank you for joining on today's Talk Story Tuesday. I'm joined with, we'll go ahead and start with introductions.
Is it my turn? I
Yeah,
never know all these things. Okay. How's it, everyone? My name is Farah Kahealani Rivera. I'm a licensed midwife here in Washington State. I do a lot of community work, so I feel like I have a lot of roles in community. I think I've labeled myself as a perinatal advocate. I come from a line of midwives. This is my grandmother Salomea Queen of Mendoza, and she was the partida, or the midwife on the island of Luzon, a place that is now known as the Philippines. I've been here in Washington State since around 2014. Graduated from Bastyr University with my master's. I don't believe that you need a master's to be a midwife, but it was really wonderful to have some letters behind my name because those count in really important conversations. I'm a founder of the Pacific Islander Health Board. I'm also on a handful of other boards working specifically to really enhance culturally relevant care, meaning having more individuals represented within the healthcare system surrounding maternity as well as the first year in postpartum. I have a real big heartfelt feeling for that. I'm no longer practicing as a midwife. I'm currently the academic director for Cedar Medicine School of Midwifery, so creating more midwives. I was a previous perinatal and lactation program director at Open Arms, where I was able to help mobilize some capacity building to train more doulas of color, more childbirth educators, specifically in the American Indian Alaska Native Black population, as well as the Pacific Islander population as well. So have a lot of roles that I've dealt with in community, and really excited to be here to share some things that I've picked up along the way.
yes. Thank you for sharing. We're excited to have you. And then go on with our next guest.
Ali Rakoy. Hi, everyone. My name is Diala Uweki. I'm the manager at the PI Health Board, and I'm also the Palawan Healthcare Navigator. And I'm fairly new to the birthing world. So we were just touching base earlier, and I was mentioning that I just got trained with FISA through the Global Perinatal Services to become a doula. And so I'm in that process. And Sarah, it's so nice to meet you and to hear of all the amazing work you're doing. I mean, being introduced to this through community, with the way in the Palawan community, how birthing practices are made or highlighted. And then to hear it here now that I've moved to the United States, it's like it's a touch base. I get to kind of reconnect with my island, with our culture, and also learn of how we're kind of growing this practice, or like, I guess, rebranding it and immersing ourselves in the practice. So
Mm.
really happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. And for those that are just joining on, for today's topic, we're going to be talking about building our labor support system and what that looks like. And what better way to talk about the experience than having our midwives and soon to be doulas just come on and talk about the conversation. And so, if you have any questions or any stories you want to share, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll be sure to highlight it during today's live. But yes, so
Can I
uh,
start with something? Because I think it's important for me to acknowledge, because we're going to be throwing around terminology. And it's important to use those terminologies in community because I feel like it helps to develop a shared language. But the reality of the word doula and midwife is that that's not what they're called in our culture. So I
Exactly.
just want to identify that and just like really put it out there. Born and raised in Hawaii, and our midwives are called palekeki. And where my ancestors are from, they're called partidas. But on the other areas of where the Philippines is, they're called camadronas. And so I just want to make sure that I'm saying these things because it's also important to know that when we think of midwives or doulas, the actual truth of what the word doula actually is, Greek. Is it a Greek word, DL? I keep on forgetting. It's a Greek word, and it
Oh,
right.
don't call me out right now. I
Go back to
think
the terminology, go back to your training.
No pressure, no pressure. But it's a terminology that's very much mainstream now. But when we're
mhm.
thinking about who we're supporting birth, that was our ohana. Like it was auntie who probably
Exactly.
like 6, 7 kids be like, yeah, you should come to my birth because you've done this a couple times, so you know what to do. Or the midwife was the chosen person. Like that's who my great grandmother was. She had a handful of births. She had like 6 kids, and because she did that, her and her husband, Francis Mendoza, were the individuals who birthing people would go to. So I just wanted to identify that because, for the audience that we're speaking to, but also to just have that reclamation piece back of, yeah, you're a doula. But also, part of why individuals are being trained is so that reclamation piece is demystifying birth and having more people a part of that.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. Again, it's always good to touch base and go back to where it all began within our own culture. And like you said, you don't have to have a title to have a heart to care for the people that you love or the community that you love. So thank you so much. But for those that are new to the birth world, like even for myself, like I'm new to the PI Health Board and the prenatal program, but I'm just here to learn more about the experience and what it is that doulas and midwives do to support our moms. So we can go ahead and start with that question. Um, yeah,
Never know who should go first.
I know it's back and forth, but
What made you want to go to the training with? Well, first of all, Feist is amazing. She just opened up the
Yes, that
first
was an amazing experience.
birth center in Washington State. So cheers if you're watching this, Feist,
Correct.
if you guys know Feist, like big deal. First Black-owned birth center. Mercedes, which is something beautiful, is next. Will be the second Black-owned birth center. So just got a little shout out to my midwife homegirls out there. But yes, Diala, why did you
I
choose to go to the training?
I honestly I think from a very young age I was very drawn to like childcare, and a lot of my background is with like childcare provide being a childcare provider, and also just being that older cousin. I watched the kids when I moved out here. I went from being the youngest of my family and moved in with my aunt and uncle, and I was the oldest of their kids. So that came with its own responsibilities, and I feel like it of course, growing up, it's hard, but then I kind of realized that it was something that I really love to do. I love being able to work. And then in my background, so I'm from the Republic of Palau, and we have a practice called Omangat, and that's the first childbirth ceremony. And I think that's where I really got introduced to childbirth world. Not I think. I know that's where I got introduced. And I think not having access to it, and then now being in nonprofit world, being able to access these resources and becoming um, more educated on what it all means. I've seen the connections with childbirth in Palau and then out here. So you mentioned like terminology. I ref, I'm like so anxious right now. Sorry guys.
no, it's okay.
I feel like I got very excited because I never knew what words to use to name what the practices were in Palau. Like in my mind, it's just my aunties coming over. Like a cousin is pregnant in the family, the aunties are coming over, and in our practices, the aunties actually come and stay in one house, and then they tend to the mother. We do a hot bath. They do a medicinal steaming for the mother, and so all in that's just I feel like just life. Like that's just what's part of my culture, my identity. But then to come out here and to have to feel like you're reclaiming that too, but also taking in the knowledge that you're learning, that's what really pulled me into becoming a doula and kind of shifting from nonprofit or I guess health insurance to more childbirth related. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you for asking. I'm always excited to talk about just kind of those connections because I don't think it's a conversation held a lot in my community. So to see those connections, I'm just so eager to share and be like, yes, like we've been practicing this. This is not a new subject. We just now there's just a name.
Mm-hmm.
Birth work, being a midwife is one of the oldest professions.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. Like when I speak in different settings, I think I majority of the time I start with the question of who has been to a birth. And then I get OBs raising their hand, nurses raising their hands, and doulas raising their hands, and I wait. I give the audience like a pause, and I'm like, everybody here has been to a birth, and it's like that. Like I think I've had people look at me like, "What do you mean? I've never seen a birth. Like I don't do that." I'm like, "You had your own. You've been to a birth because you had a birth. You wouldn't be here unless you had a birth." And I feel like that allows for a commonality of ground of how sacred that space is. And Diela, I love that you brought up traditions specifically in how to care for pregnant people and postpartum folks, because it's actually across culture practice. And I've never met my great grandmother, this beautiful woman right here in her bamboo house. I've never met her, but I feel her in my hands when I've attended birth. And when I'm working with people, when I'm feeling on their bellies, I feel like there's something in my cells that just know. And while that is a part of why I came, it's actually more of a solidifying part. So I'll like tell that story because I think it's really relevant in this space. But I want to identify that, Diela, what you talked about is cross culture. I didn't learn those things. I didn't learn the ritual surrounding a postpartum bath and yerbas. Like I didn't know what that was. It was, and in matter of fact, it's actually affecting community where we're seeing more postpartum anxiety and depression because of that lack of family or that support that's around. Like it's a cultural thing for when a baby is born, the family comes and cares for that family unit. And being not in a place where there might be a lot of family, that's one of the contributing factors of why I truly believe, and there's research about it, of why postpartum depression and anxiety is on the rise. So I'm trying to think about what I was going to share. Oh, my story about like the midwifery stuff. So gosh, there was a time in my life where I was having lots of fun in my 20s. And when you do that, then there comes another time when you're like, I think I gotta start getting serious with my life. Maybe gotta just start getting serious. I'm having way too much fun. And there was a moment where I was like, I really like working with people who have wombs and babies. I'm like, I feel called to that. And sat a lot in a lot of reflection and prayer. And when I say that, even for myself in my late 20s, like that was also awkward to like sit in prayer and to sit in reflection of let's get serious in life. And I came across midwifery and birth, and the word doula was starting to come up. I might be aging myself when I say that, but the word doula was like starting to come up, and I actually didn't know what that was. And I applied for a Bastier, which is the program that I had completed here in Washington State, and I was accepted. And while I was in school, there was this driving force of a social justice piece of like our maternal mortality rates here in the United States are horrific. That is definitely something I can get behind. And while I was in school, it was then presented to myself that my great grandmother was a partida. So I didn't know. I didn't know that was part of my lineage. And I actually kind of sat with that new information because it was the second year that I was in grad school that it was then shared that that's what she did. That I came from that line, and it kind of like all made sense. It all just like came together. And when I speak to other midwives or doulas, there's like this thing that we say, like it's a calling. Have you heard this, Diala? Like when you work in birth, it's a calling because it's not easy. Like it's not something that is meant for everyone to do. I feel like I've been blessed to be able to even be at that birth altar and to still serve in this capacity to create more doulas and support more specifically BIPOC and LGBTQ plus student midwives to support them on their journey. And it was because of my experiences of not having representation in my instructors, but also in my preceptor sites, of learning about what is it really like to stand at that birth altar. And while my medical skills, I feel like my medical and my hand skills are so important. That's why I went to school. I also believe that there was a part of me when I graduated where I had to then reclaim my birth heart back. Where I went through this significant point of grad school, but me being back as the midwife that I wanted to be, I had to reclaim a lot of things. And part of that reclamation was who was I at that as a midwife? Like what did that mean? And who did I want to serve? And what is really going to help the community that I want to serve? And it was then that I started to learn more songs. I know that might sound weird, but I was also gifted with songs to sing at births, also to sing to mothers. I was also gifted with plant medicine, specifically here in the Pacific Northwest. So learning all of and it goes back to Diana what you said about like they take a bath, but not just any bath. There's medicines in those waters. There's medicine in that water that is specifically to help support a immediate postpartum. We call immediate postpartum is right after the baby's born. That help so that there's a healing, but also a ceremony of a bath and helping to help close or allow for that place to be still. And the baby also joins in as well. You get the baby in there. Baby's quite happy to be back in like a submerged water. Not fully, like not the face. That's not good. But there's also ceremony, but there's also in I have excuse me two labels of what it's been called. I've heard it be called the La Boyer bath, which is a French word for it, but also a Mayan bath because I was also trained but also gifted what it is like to submerge a newborn who possibly may have had some significant things happen at their birth. And sometimes when they come out, they mad. There's like, oh my God. And when they sometimes they need to decompress. And I have working with Guatemalan midwives back in LA. They had taught me this thing where after a baby's born and they mad. I mean, like they're supposed to be like this. Like when a baby's born, they're supposed to be like this. But sometimes you can tell, like, ooh, I think you need to go back in the water and like be calm. And what I've done, but also have watched other midwives do, is that we'll get like a warm bath. The bath has to be pretty warm because in a mom's womb, it can be up to 103 degrees. It can be very warm in there. So when it's warm in there, when you're thinking about decompressing or having a little person kind of decompress or kind of I don't like the word relax. So I'm trying to find a different word for it because I feel like relaxing when you're telling that to a pregnant person in labor, like that's just not the word that you use because
they'll do the exact opposite.
Like what does that mean? So loosen up, I guess, to kind of, I guess decompress is the best way I can say it. And I will share my favorite story where this little person had a birth and it was quite long. It was long, so they were in the canal for quite a while, and you could tell that this baby was not happy. The baby had lots of things to say when the baby was born. So I'm like, I think this one might benefit from a Mayan or La Boyer bath. I don't know. I'm not sure how I'm going to call it, but I like to put babies back in water sometimes. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I got a nice warm bath, put a thermometer in there, make sure that it was warm enough and not too cold. So put the baby back into the water, and baby was covered up to like the face, so even their ears were submerged. And then you see this little kid who was like, not at the world. You see them start to do this.
Oh my gosh.
And then they started doing this. And what that means and Diela, you might know this too, but what that means for me is like, yep, that baby's ready to nurse. Mm-hmm. Right. So we got the baby nice and warm, my baby off, put the baby back on mom's chest, and immediately the baby started to nurse. And that's a success part. Definitely a successful birth story. And yeah, got to see that baby a couple more times before they were discharged. Because in with my scope, we see newborns for 2 weeks, and then we get to see postpartum mamas for 6 weeks after
Mm.
they're born. So that's specifically for out of hospital midwifery. Because I know that I'm not. There's people watching who are like, well, what are midwives and what's the difference? My specialty is specifically for out of hospital. I'm trained to do births out of the hospital, so at birth centers, in homes, got babies in cars, in parking lots, sometimes. But there's also midwives who work in the hospital, and I'm a strong advocate for if the person is within range to be or has a type of pregnancy where they can see midwives. I highly recommend individuals seek that kind of care. For one, it's the oldest profession in the world. We're experts in birth as well as pregnancy and in postpartum. And when I think of what does it mean if individuals cannot see midwives, then OBs or obstetricians are the next best thing. And we're thinking about individuals who have higher risk pregnancies and or have pre-existing medical conditions that do require someone who has a different scope than a midwife might have. I said a lot. I'm gonna be quiet now.
No, you're okay.
I was just soaking in this knowledge. Like, oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing this information. Like,
Yeah, and I feel that's the first I've heard of the bath to kind of calm the baby, because in my brain I was like, wait, in our training they're supposed to go straight on to mom after birth. I'm confused.
Oh,
But
let me
then
clarify. This was not right after the baby's born. Like I'm watching it, like I'm doing my assessments, I'm measuring baby, I'm like this thing
Mhm,
is hard, like doing my assessment. And I did try to get that baby to nurse. That baby was not having it. That kiddo had things to say. That kiddo
mhm,
was like, I need to express myself before you do anything with me. So then I
mhm.
made the suggestion. So Diala, you are absolutely right. After a baby's born, it is important to get that baby back to the mother's chest.
mm,
And you probably Pfizer probably told you this, but it's because physiologically what happens with your temperature here after a baby's born is that this area specifically increases in temperature,
mhm.
so that it's an automatic. After a baby's born, hormones kick in. Hormones are already kicking in, but the next place is because that's where lactation happens. That's where a baby's supposed to be.
Yes.
And I
Even the
told
comments agree. Everyone says for the skin to skin for bonding, and it's
Mhm.
very important just to build that.
Yeah, and I think your story just kind of like opened my eyes up to the different possibilities that come out of when a child is born. Because in my brain I'm like, okay, there's this whole transition phase of this is what needs to be done, but then like in reality, of course, you're tending to mother and child, so you have to
Mhm.
understand that you're tending to both their needs. And it's just, I think it's eye-opening to get to hear the process, so thank you for sharing your story.
Yes, of course. I think I wanted to share one more fact. So I think about like when the baby is placed or the mom brings the baby, like literally, hello,
Pulls.
hi, mine's now, right? I like to do that. I think towards the ending of my catching baby career, I think I got to a point where I literally was like, come parents, come grandparents. Oh, little brother, you want to catch a baby?
Oh my god, I have it. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yes, and yes, it was. I feel like I got so comfortable with birth that I was at a place of like, yes, I can do this. But how beautiful would it be if there was a request of having? I think my favorite's a forehanding, like I would say six-handed catch because my hands are always there, but mostly four hands, meaning the mother. So excuse me, the birthing person. Let me rephrase that: the birthing person reaching down, and then I'll either have the partner, grandparent, or somebody next to me, or I'm behind them and I'm just helping to guide their hands to have the baby emerge, be touched by people who want to be the birthing people want the baby to be touched by, and then obviously directly onto excuse me, the birthing person's chest. Um, my other favorite fact is about how when a pregnant person is pregnant, there there's a handful of things that enhance in color. DLA, you know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
So one of the many things that happen is that a person's areolas or their nipples actually darken in color. And this can sometimes happen on a pregnant person's face. Like some people get pregnancy mask on their face. So some people actually have darkened spots on their face. Um,
Mm.
and the purpose of the darkening, for one, is I like to think of as, and this might be inappropriate to share on Facebook Live or but it's when you think about when a baby can see when they're first born, they can see shadows. And if you're thinking that a baby can see shadows, the darkening and the darkening of a person's breast or chest in that sim allows them to have more of a target of like, okay, I can see that. And where they can kind of like see is from here to here. So this is the sight area of when a baby is born where they can actually like engage and hear and listen. So I think about that as well. One of my other pregnancy, postpartum lactation facts that I wanted to put out there in the universe.
That's cool.
Isn't
Oh,
it? Isn't that cool? I have one more. Do you want? I just want one more
No,
about lactation. I am
go
so
keep
sorry.
coming.
That's what
Keep
I'm
them coming.
so sorry to cut.
you're good.
I'm obviously a lactation advocate. I believe that if a person wants to nurse, that they should be supported in order to do that. And I say that with the caveat that there's some individuals who cannot and will not want to nurse, and that's totally fine. But if they want to, if they like if they come in and they're like, I want to nurse my kid, that they should be given every opportunity to do so. So my favorite lactation fact is that when a baby latches on to a breast, um, that the saliva, when it touches a person's nipple, actually changes and modifies the milk that is within the glands and comes out exactly the way that it needs to, so help to support where the baby is at. So
Mm.
if a person can have longevity in their lactation journey and the baby starts to teeth, that when that saliva touches, interacts with the nipple, then a postpartum body will then formulate something inside of the milk in order to help teething to be soothed for that kiddo. So if there's longevity in lactation, then there are components specifically in breast milk that can help with that part of a baby's journey.
Wow. That. Oh, thank you so much. That is.
The more you know. I think I'm very not interested. I love learning the way like mother or the birthing parent and the child just kind of ultimately always unite. There's always like the way they both coexist and support one another. And so
Mm-hmm.
to hear of like just the mere fact of them latching can, and then the mother sends like that message to give the child what it needs. That's insane. Science is insane to me.
Yeah,
It
and
is.
the only reason I feel like there's so much that you can find about breast milk. Like there's so much information about specifically milk, and when you
Mhm.
learn about those things and what components it has what components it holds, it makes sense why it's the preferred food.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It totally makes sense why. And I think my favorite like picture of it is when they put formula under a microscope, and then they put a nurse's like a human milk. They put both under a microscope and they looked completely different. And when you look up like what is in breast milk and what is in formula, like literally it's lists and lists of all these omegas, all these healthy fats, all of these antifungal, antibacterial things that a postpartum body makes. And it's so cool. Like it cures it doesn't cure everything, but it definitely can cure a lot of things. And even so much so that if you were to take milk of a postpartum person who's lactating, and if the baby is sick, that it actually changes even the color.
Mhm.
So you've seen it too, right, Yella? You're just like, wow, that's like fluorescent blue, and for a reason. It's not spoiled. It is because
Right.
what the baby needed. And they've even compared COVID COVID milk, like not, I don't know, excuse me, let me rephrase myself. Individuals whose babies who have COVID and their lactating parent was changing them, like they were nursing, and because of that, the milk changed. So some things that folks can look up. It's so much fun, and it's almost like, how do people not know this? Such a cool fact. Such a
Yeah.
cool fact.
It's crazy. But I mean, adding on to that, is there, or Alan, actually, Alinda, we have a question in the chat. Are there disadvantages of breastfeeding compared to formula?
Disadvantages?
Disadvantages of breastfeeding?
That it takes a lot of time. It's a job. Let's be real about that. That is, when I in prenatal appointments, I oftentimes have so much conversation about the postpartum period and lactation. I feel like culturally what's happening right now is people's focus so much on the birth. So much on the birth. And that's important. Focusing on the birth is important. But usually it's only within like a 24, 40, 72, 48-hour period. Like it's a couple of days. And then you got this postpartum period. So when I think about disadvantages, it's really hard for me to like begin that conversation because I'm like lactation advocate all the way through. But to be honest, it's a job. When a baby is first born, the recommendation is to feed baby every 2 to 3 hours. I say every 2.5, 3 hours, and it's because it's also helping to bring the milk in. So there's a disadvantage to that. The other layer of that is that you gotta make sure you're eating. And while that's important, it's also a really interesting conversation depending on where I'm serving as a midwife, where I'm like, did you eat today? And having someone 3 days postpartum be like, no, I'm like pulling stuff out of my refrigerator to eat in order to keep your milk supply up, or even bring the milk in. So a disadvantage is that it's a job.
Mm.
An advantage of it is that there's so many health benefits. There's so many health benefits. And when we're thinking, I feel like there's a lot of focus on specifically that it helps the baby, helps the baby, helps the baby. It also helps the lactating parent.
Oh.
And when we're thinking about bonding, there is importance in that, and getting to know a little person. Lactation isn't always easy. Like I think I also want to say that out loud. Like it's not. Have you ever seen the skit by Ali Wong and she talks about breastfeeding?
I think so, yes.
It is hilarious. It is so funny, and I'm like, no, Ali Wong, don't say that because it is hard. It totally is hard. She talks about how she felt it was going to be this beautiful bonding ceremony and that everything was going to be wonderful and like butterflies were going to come out of her butt or something. And it wasn't like that. It was hard. It was hard. It was really hard for her. And I also like to vocalize when I'm working with pregnant people and they want to lactate. I say that you're learning. You're totally learning. Like not only is the lactating person learning, the baby's learning too. It's a learning experience. And when you're thinking about the advantage also for the parent, bonding is one of them. But getting to know your kid in order for you to become good at caring for your child is a huge deal. Huge deal. And that doesn't happen overnight for some folks. Some parents, when they experience immediately having a baby, it can be rough, especially if you're in a setting where there's minimal support, and or if there was a birth that took a really long time. You're tired. I've literally held little newborns up to their lactating parent, and somebody was feeding this lactating parent. I was just holding the baby at the breast in order for the baby to feed.
Mm.
That's support. Like, that is what support should look like. That is what I hope for all immediate postpartum individuals. And the part of bonding with your kiddo, there isn't a lot of emphasis about that and how important it is, because that can help to prevent postpartum depression and anxiety as well. When you are bonded to your child, when you know what cry means hungry,
Mm.
when you know what cry means I got a diaper and you need to fix it. To know what cry of your child means, I just want to be picked up and talked to. Because then parents learn that when they get to spend time with their kid. And that's such an important part of that postpartum period.
Mm-hmm.
and or having somebody who has experienced it that way, like Diana, what you talked about, how like it's culture where people come over and they help care for that family. So
Right.
they're probably cooking and cleaning, and then also holding the baby so that the postpartum person can rest.
Exactly.
And it's so beautiful to be able to. I remember doing that. I remember going to my aunt's house and just holding the baby so that my aunts could sit.
Mhm.
And I would be cooking. I would be caring for the newborns, and I definitely have that as a memory for myself as well.
Mhm.
I was that. I was that. I was that person. I was definitely that person. So it makes sense that I went into this field.
Yeah.
Um, but to also add on to the chat, another question was asked is, do all mothers have to breastfeed, such as intake any alcohol or drug substance use?
Hmm.
And
That's a good question. I'm so sorry, Gabby. Was it a little more? You said it was if people are on medication or.
yeah, if they're on medication or if they intake any alcohol or substances. And
Mhm.
another one to add is, if I'm using pump, how long can I go before the milk dries up? There's a two-parter, but I can repeat after.
Yeah, so I am wondering how to approach this.
Mm.
Um, and it's tricky. And the reason I'm taking a pause for even myself is, for one, the person who's asking the question, if they're already a lactating individual, there's a lot more to uncover. I feel like there's a lot more to unwrap and unravel there. The other question about substance use and alcohol, that's also a lot to unwrap, and I want to be very mindful about about how I respond, because for one, when I think about addictions, I think about the importance of what addictions are, why people are addicted, and I see it as a coping mechanism, and what does it mean for a birthing parent as well as for a newborn. And the other layer of that is, if there's substance use and or addictions, does this pregnant person or does this postpartum individual, did they receive care? Are they in a program? And or is this about developing an addiction in postpartum? So I know that I want to ask more questions before I respond, because I want to be mindful of that. Like, we know specifically addictions here in Washington state is horrendous. It's really bad. It is really, really bad, and it actually contributes to the maternal mortality rates here in Washington state. So I want to be mindful of that. Oh,
Okay,
thank you, person who can help. I find, okay. So hello.
this
Sweet.
was another. Oh,
I'm looking for a bond who help me. Oh, it looks like that's not real.
Oh.
okay. My bad. I just clicked a button. My bad. Okay,
I
here
was,
I
I
will
was
go ahead
asking
and
for
add
euros. I was
the question. I will organize. My apologies, but this
so
was the
almost
first question.
4 months into alcohol or drugs. Yeah, so this is what I would wanted to unpack more, because if there's an existing addiction, depending on what that addiction is, it means different things for the baby. And when we're thinking about addiction, sometimes it can cause excuse me, babies who are born addicted have to be within facilities who can care for them in a way where they too, when they are born, are also going through withdrawal. So I want to be mindful of that, is that when it becomes a conversation specifically about pregnant individuals who are holding addictions, and if when their babies are born, depending on what that addiction is, it makes medical cases more apparent for that medical piece of withdrawal for the newborn to be cared for. And does that mean that the birthing person can provide milk? It's not my expertise, actually. I don't know. And what I say by that is, there's also the other option of, does that mean that another postpartum person can offer breast milk? I don't know that. It's not my expertise. I deal with normal.
Mhm.
But there's specific needs for the newborn that require more medical attention, more medical attention if they are born to a pregnant person who is who is dealing with their addictions and who are currently addicted. And if their babies are born addicted, then they require more medical care. So I hope that answers your question. I just want to be mindful about how I'm answering that question, and about whether or not drugs addictions. I specifically think about addictions and about whether or not that hinders lactation. And yes, it can. It definitely can. And whether or not it's recommended depends on the situation. Totally depends on the situation. And because I'm an out of hospital provider, I actually don't care for individuals who are holding pregnant people who have addictions. My recommendation is that they're seeking help for that. And I know of two clinics, one specifically that's out in Ballard, another one in Tacoma, that help pregnant individuals who have addictions. Because we know it's complex. It's more than just addiction. It's so much more than that.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that information. And thank you, Alinda, for sharing that with us. Yes. And they also had another question. Here, go ahead and put it up as well. If I am using pump, how long can I go before the milk dries up?
That is a great question because that also depends on the situation. So, did the individual start pumping after the baby was born, or was pumping introduced a couple of weeks after the baby was born? So that's a complex answer, and I would want to ask more questions. A couple of other questions I would like to ask is the baby a newborn anymore? Like, is the baby just doing milk, or is the baby like 6 7 months? Like, there's more questions that I would like to ask in order for me to have the correct answer or feel confident about an answer that I would give.
Okay.
I'm also thinking about how these specific questions can be answered outside of the space. And right now they're on pause, but there are virtual places called lactation lounges that Open Arms hosts. They used to have a Pacific Island one, but I know that was during COVID, so I don't think that they have it anymore. But they do have virtual lactation lounges that are going to continue back in January. There's another consulting piece at the Lido Center. I'm sorry, I'm not sure where is it. Alinda or Erlinda?
Alinda?
Linda. Okay, thanks so much for letting me know. Linda, there's also other lactation appointments that you can make that you can specifically ask those questions. One of them is the Lido Center that's at Swedish. And there's also I'm not sure where you live, but there are lactation specialists who can help out with those questions. And it sounds like you really want that. You really would like to have that answered. And my recommendation outside of this space is to kind of seek a lactation appointment. And I'm thinking Open Arms has some resources. I know specifically also Hummingbird Indigenous Family Services also has lactation services. And it just depends on where you live. I want to give resources that are relevant to where you are at and that's also accessible. So I think about that. I know that WIC also offers lactation help depending on the location. So I just want to make sure that while I want to ask more questions, that when I think about lactation questions and when they're asked in open spaces like this, a lot of times it's because someone's like, I need help right now, like right now. And I just want to be mindful of like, if I can't, because there isn't like an interaction, that there are spaces that are available for people to.
Thank you again, Alinda, for sharing. But before we have like 20 minutes left of this live, but another topic that I know we wanted to try and touch on for any first-time birthing parents or returning birthing parents, like what is a birth plan? And if it's possible for you all to dive in. And if anybody else is willing to share as well, we encourage it. But yes.
Ooh, I can jump in. That was my favorite activity
Yeah.
of my training. So essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm leaving anything out, but a birth plan is essentially how you envision your birth. And I can't remember if you're supposed to have two different plans, but essentially you choose where you want it, whether home, at a birth center, in a hospital, and then the comfort measures. So whether you want music, if you want the lights dimmed, just kind of how you want to set the environment around you to get your body ready for birthing, who you want there. So you'd also list who you want there at your birth. And I think that's it. If I'm missing, I feel like I'm missing something as I look at Farah.
Dila, that's great. I feel like
Okay.
you hit all the high notes. And I believe where I want to start is why we got birth plans. I feel like that's an important question for me to just address, because the honest truth is that when we're thinking about how we would like to a birth, is the fact that we actually have to ask that question. And I just that's a reality of the way that the systems that we are part of are. And because we have to ask that questions, I recommend having individuals have birthing plans, and it is because it's the process of beginning the conversation with a created birth team that is self-chosen, meaning the birthing person gets to choose who they want a part of their birth. That is so important, so important. And with the systems that we work within, the reality is, if you are not having an out of hospital birth or a birth center birth, and even if you're having an out of hospital birth, that sometimes you're not going to have the provider who you have had care with. That's a reality. And the reality of that also is being on call. Being on call is rough. Like that's a rough life. Being on call is a rough life. And I've done it. And while I'm no longer doing it, I did appreciate the fact that I had continuity of care with families. So when beginning the conversation of what a birth looks like, for one, Diela, there is resources now where you can type in birth plan on the internet or on your phone, and it would just like give you templates, and you can fill all those things in, and it's great.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yes, like and you can also create your own. But my experience is, when I'm working with families, they're like, I want a template. Give me something that I can just fill in. And I encourage it because it begins the conversation. I feel like when people are pregnant, that there's not enough time sometimes. It's so quick from the positive pregnancy test to when you're pushing out a baby, and it's kind of crazy of how quickly that time is. And when you set time aside, a lot of it can be done with doulas.
Mm-hmm.
To like sit and be like, let's fill out this template, or let's fill out what you want your birth to look like. And that begins the conversation of what the experience would like to be. I don't believe that I've ever met an individual, even individuals who are choosing hospital birth, where they're like, I don't care about my birth. I'm like, yes, you do. Yes, you do. I get more of that. And what it then brings up is other questions, more questions. Like, yes, music. Yes. Yes, important. I feel like music can be very important. Yes, who do you want to be there? What if it happened? And Diela, I just want to touch base with what you had said about, I think sometimes you have to have two.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, when I have worked specifically with out of hospital families, we have one for if and when the birth is completed at the birth center. But what happens if we have to transfer to the hospital? That's where the second birth plan or a backup plan is then talked about. And a lot of times I would use that birth plan to start the conversation of like, great, the plan is to have your baby at home. If we have to transfer, let's talk about what that means. And part of that conversation is, if the baby is born early, or if the baby needs more help and is sent to the NICU, who is going with that baby? And it's usually a partner or a grandma or a friend, depending on what that birth space looks like. So Diela, you touched the highlights, and that's good. And I am so impressed with all these templates. Like, they're pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like numbers. Like,
and I feel like the creativity on the templates really helps, like what you mentioned. If there are those birthing parents that aren't necessarily like don't want to do a birth plan, I feel like it just kind of draws you more, because you're like, oh my gosh, it's so cutesy. Yes, of course I would love. It's all set out for me.
it's so accessible.
Mm-hmm.
It's so accessible. I remember when birth plans were not. I'm really aging myself in this conversation, but like, I literally had people like had me folder paper of like, this is my birth plan, and they wrote it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how that was kind of my introduction to birth plans. But now there's like apps. You know how the contraction apps they have now? They also have birth plan apps. It's so great. so great. I do recommend that if people do have a birth plan, that they print out more than one, and everyone who is at the birth should have one. So meaning if partner's going to be there and doula's going to be there, everybody should have one, and then you would have an extra one specifically for the birthing environment. So if it's the nurses, if you're out of hospital, then the midwives or the providers should definitely have one as well. But everyone should have a copy of the birth plan. What is my favorite thing to add? Something that I started to do is there something regarding culture or a ceremony that the pregnant pregnant ohana, like, is something that people would like to do at that time of birth. I've had all kinds of requests, and I think one of my most memorable requests was it was actually a tradition in their family where the grandparents would wait. They would wait either, and this was at a birth center, so they waited in the waiting room. It was basically like where people checked in, and in their culture, what they would do is that if when the baby was born, they would not find out what the sex of the baby was, and then when the baby was born, depending on what gender the baby was, that did I say that? I think I got that wrong. What sex the baby was, that the grandparent would then take off what they were wearing, and then that would be the first cloth that would be on the baby. So when this particular baby was born, we looked and there was a penis. Yay! So we told the grandfather, and he wore a nice shirt. I was like, "That's a white shirt, Papa." But you want me wrap the baby in your white shirt? Oh yeah, he took his clothes off. He was like, yes, wrap this baby in this. And it was really sweet. It was really sweet, and it was definitely something that we were able to instill for that family. In other cultures, people have blankets, or I've been at births where people, right when the baby emerges and is in the pregnant, in the immediate postpartum person's arms or on their chest, they want a song to be sung to the baby. The first time I had it happen, they sang Israel Kamaka Viva Ole Summer Over the Rainbow. They sang that to the baby, and it was like I was like, oh, there's 16 people in this room. We're all and I literally
It just starts.
It was like this chorus that started to happen. And the reason I remember being like 16 people is because I counted.
Oh my.
I
Okay.
wanted to document that in the chart as like 60, maybe it was 13. It was been a couple years.
Mhm.
Between 13 and 16 people. That's a lot of people in a birth room at a person's house. But I was like 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. And I charted that like, and everyone began singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I wanted to put that in the chart because I know that they have access to they had access to their chart, and I wanted it to be documented in that way. But literally everyone in the room was singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and it was quite beautiful. It's a beautiful experience for that family. And for me too. I thought it was great. I was like, I'm from Hawaii, right? I'm singing my song. And I'm going off on a tangent. I'm sharing like all of my birth
No,
stories.
you're good. We love it. We love talking story.
It can be that way. And when I share that I've been gifted songs, like there are songs in our cultures that was specifically supposed to be sung to newborns. I know out here that there are tribes out here. The Pacific Northwest has songs specifically sung to newborns and to pregnant people. And while a lot of that many cultures may not have that anymore, it doesn't mean that we can't reclaim or create our own. So while I was gifted with those songs, there's a reason why those songs are sung. Is to allow for that bonding, that moment of like, and now we're done. With the song. Even when people are doing the bath, there are songs that are supposed to be sang. Person in that bath, right?
Yes.
I love that you're like, yes, there are songs. There are songs that are supposed to be sung in that way. And when you sing them, it means you got all your ancestors there with you singing that song to help welcome this person and to like bless that moment. And I think about that when I was gifted the songs. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many people who have sung this song. And when I'm singing it, I got them here with me too. So I think about that. I totally think about when I have the permission to sing or to have that permission to share. And it's a lot of times it's not the same culture as the not it's not my culture. We don't share a culture, but it's just a gift. And I remember I'm mindful of that. I always ask permission. Sometimes I'm also tired, so I'm like I might not sound that good, but I'll share something with you. But I feel like it's majority of the time it's welcomed, and it changes the atmosphere, it changes the energy of what's happening in that moment. It's no longer scary. It's also like this is.
Thank you for sharing all your stories.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I went to my first live birth with a loved one earlier this year,
Oh, congratulations!
and it was, I feel like being able to be in that moment. I hear of all the, just like the empowerment that birthing parents, like it's just so empowering to hear of their experiences. And I think that first moment of seeing my loved one and just kind of the energy that she put out just to welcome her baby earthside, I was just like, this, from this moment on, I don't know if I want to be a parent. Like, I'm going to be honest. From that moment, I was like teetering on that. But the support that I felt called, like what you mentioned earlier, called to do it for my loved one, I was just like, this is something that I would love to be a part of if I'm called to do it or if I'm invited into these spaces. And it's amazing to hear of your experience of having 16 people in the room, because I think it was because of COVID guidelines that the
It's
loved one
okay.
wasn't able to have anybody, especially her family's in Hawaii. Oh, yeah. So just to be the only person there and to kind of step into that role of being support, but also kind of sitting back and seeing the motions of birthing and to see the empowerment, to see the unison or when they unite right after, I was like, I'm going to start crying. This is insane. Ah, and to
You know,
hear of stories like yours, I just can only imagine just kind of the love that surrounds you.
Mhm.
oh, I mean, it means a lot, Diala, for you to say that. And what I wanna like call in the part of feeling the tears, and how I feel like I'm in the industry of love. I don't know if I've shared that, but I love being a midwife. And even though my roles have changed, I still do prenatal care. I feel like I do prenatal. I think I might start soon. When we I still cry. I still cry. I still have that moment and have those moments. And outside of seeing someone cross that birth barrier, like cross into like having a baby emerge on the earth side, another place where I find myself like tearing up and I'm like, I think I need a napkin too, is when I'm able to hear a baby's heartbeat with a family for the first time. And
Mhm.
I've been able to do that. I feel like I've done that a handful of times, but for certain families, when they start up, I'm like, yeah, I have the rest of this appointment to do. I still cry. Like I love that I still have that availability
Mhm.
in a career where I literally in a career of love. Like I feel like that's it's it feeds my heart, it feeds my soul. And I feel really lucky to be a part of those stories as well. Um, and I'm excited for you, Diela, for all of the stories. Like I remember when I first heard midwife stories, and I was just like,
Yes.
stories. And it's funny because the midwife looked directly at me, and the midwife said, "So are you. So are you. You're gonna have so many stories."
Mm.
And I remember that moment because I was like, "Really? Oh my god!" All these stories. And doing this for quite a while, I'm like, yeah, I do. And some of them are hard, but they're beautiful nonetheless, and it's still a story. So I'm happy I get to like share some tidbits of being of the kind of things that I've been able to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. But we are slowly wrapping up. But I just want to give the floor to you and thank you for joining us. And if there's anything that you last remarks before we end today's live.
Because my place in this work is different now. In nonprofit work they call it capacity building. I feel like that's the word, right? That word. I didn't know what that word when I first heard it. I was like, what is capacity building? I feel like I understand now that my role in community has changed, and I am supporting individuals and welcoming them into this work. So it's almost like a call out. Like it's a call out to come in if there's interest, if there's individuals who are interested in working in birth. There's so many things that you can do. You don't have to be a midwife. Like you really don't. You can become a childbirth educator. You can become a doula. You can become a researcher. You can become an individual who begins a support group for pregnant individuals that are culturally based. Like you could be someone in your community, and you're always surrounded by pregnant people, and you're like, I'm a start support group. Like that's my call out to call in. If there's individuals who would like to join in this work, that there are many roles that you can take, and trainings are coming up soon. Center for Indigenous Midwifery will be holding a handful of doula trainings. There are childbirth educators that we need that are culturally relevant. Like, Diela, I want you to teach about your ceremony if you have given permission. Like, people should know about that. And yeah, that's my call out to call in. If people interested, there are resources and there are places for you to stand alongside me, Gabby, and Diela in this work.
And I think similarly, if you're in a space to where I was earlier this year, if you're questioning it, if you feel called to serve birthing parents, and maybe you just want to get into trainings, like most definitely lean on us, because I would love to talk about this. And if you felt something from this talk story, you should most definitely reach out, because it's a beautiful, I feel like it's a beautiful experience, and I'm very excited to continue my journey in birth work. We don't know where I'll go. Will I stay a doula? I don't. Midwifery has never sounded so good now that I've heard this.
Yes.
Well, there's lots of opportunities, and now we're in touch, Diela.
Yeah.
All right, but thank you both of you for coming on today's talk story, and hopefully we'll have you more, and Diela, when you'll share more of your stories as well, soon to be. But thank you so much. And before we end, I just want to do a quick little plug that the BBNU program is enrolling in our January childbirth education classes. So if you or anybody you know that lives in King County is a native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, we would be happy to have you on with our classes. So if you call 253-235-5112 or email baby@pihealthboard.org, we'll be happy to have you on. But thank you so much, everyone. You have a great rest of your night and a happy holidays. Bye.
Happy holidays. Bye.